We have lost the ability to be objective about the movies and television we love. But personally, I can be objective about Superman Returns and Man of Steel, even Superman the movie. These are three movies I adore, but all three movies are flawed. I always hear from people, Man of Steel is the most perfect movie. No, it's not a perfect movie, it's a visual masterpiece. It has one of the best scores in movie making history. Gets its villain General Zod more right than Terrence Stamp's one, which I never thought was possible. Faora is awesome. Those elements are very good. Martha Kent also works very well. Diane Lane gives a very mature performance because Diane Lane was a lot younger in reality than she is as Martha Kent. They made her up to look older. It's a brilliant performance. Kevin Costner is a really, really brilliant Jonathan Kent. I mean, no one's beating Jonathan Snyder. Not should I say that again? John Snyder, not Jonathan Snyder. John Snyder as Jonathan Kent in Smallville. He really got that role. So there's a lot of great things about Man of Steel. But why did Man of Steel only make $650 million? Normally, the audience isn't wrong. Again, I repeat, I love Man of Steel, I love Superman Returns, I love Superman the movie, but we must be objective. There's too many people online, either on YouTube or Twitter, that lack that objectivity when they talk about the Snyderverse. Snyder is a director who likes the visual. He's about physicality. He's about the physicality of women and men, physical strength of men and women. And Cavill is built up in Man of Steel as a physical beast. So he looks fantastic. He really does. But what Man of Steel truly lacks is a heart. Now, you'll throw out so many reasons why I'm wrong about this. First of all, it rushes through the romance between Clark, Superman, and Lois. It gives you a semblance of their version of romance, but it's rushed. So when they actually kiss at the end, it does feel forced. And I think I've spoken to many people like me who adore Man of Steel and agree with that. Clark doesn't have his dynamic in the Daily Planet like he has in other live action versions and in the comics. He's in the Daily Planet in the end with a little smile for Lois, and it's a great little ending. I'll give them that. But you take something away that Superman fans have adored since the George Reeves show. Since the George Reeves show, since the radio show, since the comics, Clark, Lois, Jimmy and Perry have had their banter at the Daily Planet. It's a very important part of the Superman mythos. And I know some people, modern day fans, won't agree with that. It's something that James Gunn, and we've discussed this already, will bring back to Superman Legacy. And I think that's very, very important. Taking that away from Man of Steel hurt the movie. But Zack Snyder, David Goyer and Christopher Nolan basically went what I did as a kid when I was watching Superman 78. Oh no, do we have to watch the stuff in the Daily Planet? Do we have to watch them being lovey-dovey on the balcony? I just want Superman saving people and flying. It's so cool. So that was the mentality of Man of Steel. I kind of dig that mentality in a way. Let's get on with the action. Krypton looks stunning. And before people tell me Krypton on Man of Steel looks better than Krypton from Superman 78, Dick Donner didn't have CGI VFX at his disposal. So he did the best that he could. And for its time, Krypton is stunning in 78. Cinematographer John Barry, set designer John Barry was absolutely fantastic. He wasn't the cinematographer, he was the set designer. He did Star Wars 77 as well. The man was a freaking genius. It was his idea to make the planet Krypton look like an ice planet and the crystals and everything. The man was a genius. Anyway, we're talking about the problems with Man of Steel and Superman Returns today. So for everything good that Man of Steel does, it looks great. I've never seen dynamic action in a film since the first Transformers. There's a lot of similarities between Michael Bay and Zack Snyder. Now, some people think that's a put down. It's not for me because I adore Michael Bay as a visual action director. He and Zack Snyder are the best at that. Villeneuve, visually, is a beautiful director. And the problem is with visual directors, sometimes they're not really interested in the core heart of the narrative. They skip all of that for the visuals and the action. And I think Man of Steel does this. Of course, the biggest thing that, of course, cost Man of Steel $400 million and stopped it reaching $1 billion is the fact that Superman murders Zod, or kills him, more accurately, in self-defense. Now, I was just reading a piece from someone who writes for Screen Rant, who I follow on Twitter. It's an old article, and he's still saying that it was the right storytelling decision to make. It was a PR disaster. Let me repeat it. Superman killing Zod is a PR disaster. What's worse, we all expected something to be referenced in the sequel, A Man of Steel 2, or in the end it was BVS. Not once do I hear Superman saying BVS, or even at the gravestone, when he's with his mum, when he's at his father's gravestone. I know what it's like to kill. I never want to feel that way again. I've spoken about this on this channel before. Simple dialogue, everyone, just a reference that he felt terrible for killing Zod. There's another problem with Man of Steel. I mean, that's the big core problem. That's the thing that cost the movie $400 million, and I'll stand by that, and I'll face anyone who has any argument about what I'm saying about the problems with Man of Steel. Because, as I say, it's about being balanced in our discussions, and it's most important to be balanced in our discussions about films and television shows that we love. It's easy to hate on things that we hate. It just comes out. It's easy to see the bad things. And even in the stuff we hate, sometimes it's good to say, do you know what? I didn't like this movie. I thought it was badly edited, badly directed, badly written, but there's some good things. It's like me in the Flash movie. It's not a movie I particularly like. Now, I saw a cut that made it a much better movie. You remember after I saw the test screening, I told you it was quite an impressive movie. It was. Wonder Woman 84, I said the same thing after I saw the test screening. It was a pretty impressive movie that did something very dramatic to the DC universe. They didn't use that version in the end. So I'm watching these test screenings. I'm telling you how good they are. The WB release other versions. They did it to Superman Returns as well. They cut the return to Krypton sequence out from the movie, the most important part of the movie. It shows you the emotion of Superman going back to a home he never thought he was going to see again. He was duped by Lex. Lex pays a scientist to go on the news and say that there's remains of the planet Krypton. So Superman rebuilds his crystal ship that brought him to Earth in Superman 78, and he explores. And we see this in the deleted Return to Krypton sequence. It's pretty much finished. The VFX is there. It looks fucking stunning. I believe it was meant to be a pre-title sequence. It's perfect. It would have made the movie work even more. But I'll get to Superman Returns in a moment. So Man of Steel is this visual masterpiece. The action pops, the music pops. Zod's great, Feora's great. But Superman doesn't really say much. Yes, he does smile at times. Henry is very charming as Clark and as Superman. I don't have a problem in that. But he doesn't have the dialogue that Christopher Reeve or Dean Cain or Tom Welling or other actors, even George Reeves. George Reeves had long dialogue, but George Reeves was a well-trained actor. And if his mentor didn't die in the Second World War, you know, George Reeves, who played Superman in the original The Adventures of Superman, the black and white, in the 1950s, you know, would have been a great actor. And he always resented playing Superman in the end because he loved it and he loved how he was this positive role model for kids. But, you know, imagine you're a great actor. You're meant for great things. You were in Gone with the Wind. It was one of the first things that you did. And then you end up just wearing tights and a cape. You know, it's a bit of a come down. And so I understand how Matt Reeves, what's his name? George Reeves. Have I been saying Matt Reeves? Jesus Christ. Got Matt Reeves on the brain. There's a reason for that. That's a few videos down the line. Anyway, so George Reeves kind of resented Superman in the end. So yeah, Man of Steel visually is perfect. In fact, if you marry the good things from Superman Returns and the good things from Man of Steel and put them together, you have the perfect Superman film. So you just have to take out the things that are wrong. Here's the thing about Man of Steel. It doesn't really do much wrong. Mostly, it's a very, very good film. I think having the female soldier saying I think he's kind of hot isn't funny. And, you know, in an age where we're trying to have women be stronger, more independent, more intelligent, but women do say they find men attractive. It's natural, but in films it kind of stereotypes females, and it's just not funny. So that would go. I didn't like that one little bit, and I think she's such a great little actor, the woman who plays that character, and I love seeing her in BVS again. It's a shame they did that to her. And also, she didn't seem to know what a world engine was, how, you know, what Zod was doing. She kind of says, well, what's that? Well, she's a soldier. She should actually know. And by the way, she's a high-ranking soldier. If you're in that room in Man of Steel with Martian Manhunter, you're pretty high up the ranking. She's literally his personal assistant. So yeah. So that was a bit odd. So I'd cut that out. And yes, look, Superman murdering or killing Zod in self-defense is a very compelling moment. I didn't mind it. When I was in the cinema the first time I saw it, and I saw Man of Steel a great many deal of times in the movie theatre, as you Americans say, or at the cinema, how us British call it, you know, the air got sucked out of the room. People were speechless. Here's the problem. It goes to the scene after that I explained to you. Superman destroys the satellite. And you know, and then the female soldier goes, I think he's kind of hot. Superman seems to have forgotten already that he killed Zod. And he doesn't say 6 months later. That would have been a better kind of form of movie making, storytelling. It's something that Goya needed to do, something that Snyder obviously didn't think about and think is important. But you need Superman to still be affected by Zod's death. Because it's a bit like Michael Shannon understands that the script is a bit bare in terms of repercussions for what you're doing. So he does things in his acting that are not in the script. For example, I'll give you a great example. When he murders Zod, when Zod murders Jor-El, out of anger when Lara pushes the button to launch Kal-El's ship, he gets angry and he stabs Jor-El, doesn't he? You can see the regret in Shannon's face, and you can tell that they used to be friends, and it's kind of explained at the beginning of the movie briefly. And then there's the bit near the end of the movie, in the third act of the movie, when he basically deletes Jor-El from the artificial intelligence Kryptonian computers. Now, he wants to get rid of him out of his head, you know, because he's saying a lot of stuff, which is probably facts, and Zod can't handle it. So he deletes him. But just think about this for a minute. In the reaction from the actor, you can see that this is the last time he'll ever speak to his best friend ever again. And again, you can see the regret in Shannon's face. And I think this is brilliant by Michael Shannon. He knows that these emotional elements are not in the script, but he gives something to the audience because you need these emotional elements. This is something that Man of Steel lacks very deeply. It's something that's in Shannon's performance, and I think that's why fans adore Michael Shannon. I think he may be the best supervillain we ever saw. In comparison to Man of Steel and Superman the movie, Dick Donner and Tom Mankiewicz, who was a great writer and rewrote the entirety of Superman the movie, really wasn't overly focused on the villain. Now, Man of Steel really does a good job of, you know, developing a villain. But what you've got in Lex Luthor in Superman 78 is a jovial kind of Bond villain. But it worked for the time. So he's not the Lex that we know. But back then, Lex wasn't really a businessman. He was just about becoming a businessman and moving on from being the wacky, you know, crazy scientist he was in the early comics. So they did something original. And also, You can't have, you can't have him in the power suit in Superman 78 because it would look bad. And they knew that. So they just stuck to the basics. So the most important thing for Donner and Mankiewicz wasn't the villain and making him dark and evil and hateful. They didn't want to go there. The thing with Dick Donner was, if you make the love story work, the rest of the movie works. And that's why today, Superman the movie has grossed around $200 billion if you translate the money from the 70s to the 21st century. So Superman, the movie, is the most successful movie, the most successful Superman movie of all time. That's a factual statement and it can't be challenged. Whether you like that film or you're a Snyder fan, I don't care. I love Man of Steel, I love Superman the movie, and I love Superman Returns. So Man of Steel is very good visually, but it doesn't want to do the donkey work. It doesn't want to do the hard work, the development, the beautiful dialogue we saw between Reeve and Kidder, George Reeves, and Phyllis Coates or Noel O'Neill in The Adventures of Superman, Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher. This is a very important part of Superman, whether you want to admit it or not, and it skips it. So when people go and see this movie, they go, yes, it looks really good. Cavill is a great Superman. There's lots of things that work in this movie, but it lacks that something. It doesn't do the spade work in the love story between Clark and Lois, Superman and Lois, so you don't ever really believe that they're in love. As I say, the screen kiss they have, it lacks chemistry, it lacks anything. They're just kissing for the hell of it. He could have been kissing somebody else, right? He could have been kissing General Swanwick. In fact, he and General Swanwick, probably had better chemistry than him and Lois Lane in that film. Because chemistry can be manipulated. You can make two actors have chemistry whether they've got it or not. Now, Kidder and Reeve had automatic screen chemistry, just like Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford did in Star Wars 78. It's either there or it's not, but a good director can make it work. I mean, look at Amber Heard and Jason Momoa in the first Aquaman. They don't have natural chemistry, as Walter Hamada stated in that liable case. But James Wan's such a good director, he really did make that love story work. In fact, the love story and the way it's done in the first Aquaman is exactly what they didn't do in Man of Steel. It's something that James Wan and his writers got right, and basically Snyder, Goyer and Nolan couldn't be bothered with that love story. You look at Bruce Wayne in the Dark Knight trilogy. He's kind of in love with Rachel, but they don't really have a love story. Historically, they probably went there before, off screen, but I don't think Nolan's really good at romance. I don't think Goyer is good at romance. I don't think they're interested in that. The thing is with Goyer, he came up with this concept for Man of Steel, which was a first contact story. He said that's the only way you can make a relatable Superman story in the modern era. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. But he wanted to make a real world Superman, as did Snyder, as did Nolan. But you see, you can make a real world Batman. I've said this before. You can make a real world, you can do a lot of real world characters from DC. But I think Superman was created to be a wish fulfillment character. He's that genie in the bottle. When you rub the lamp, he comes out and you feel safe. You feel that life is a lot better because you made that wish. So putting Superman in the real world can be utterly problematic. As I say, I love Man of Steel for what it is. But when you come out of the cinema, you feel charged. It's like you've taken a drug and you want more of that drug, right? That's what Man of Steel is. But in terms of the love story, instead of, the other elements we normally see in the comics and other Superman live action, fiction, it's not there. And that's what it lacks. But there's no question about it. The killing of Zod cost the movie at least $400 million. The measuring dick joke, that's something that would come out straight away as well, because it's not even funny. It's supposed to show that Lois can mix it with the men, but we already know that, right? There's other ways of showing that. So there's no need for that. And then it tells parents, I can't really take my children to see this. You know, there's a dick joke in it. You know, Superman literally breaks somebody's fucking neck. These are not things you want, you know, 5 to 10-year-olds actually watching and thinking they're good things. And that's also a problem. I remember my brother telling me that when his eldest son was really young, he wouldn't let him watch Man of Steel. In fact, he would let him watch it on hard copy, but he would skip certain things. And I think that most parents would agree with those ethics as well. So that's another problem with Man of Steel. Now, Superman Returns is a very interesting animal because it comes out about 20 years after Superman 4. A disaster of a movie that had its budget cut. Christopher Reeve had the idea to do a nuclear arms race story for Superman, being asked the question, why can't Superman stop war? If God's so powerful, why can't he stop people having cancer and dying, right? It's the age-old question of a God. So this is what Christopher Reeve wanted to do with Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. And Tom Mankiewicz, the writer we spoke about for Superman the movie, told him, never deal with real-world things that Superman can cure. It just gets you into trouble. But I don't think that was the problem. Superman 4 just had its budget cut. And it was basically Christopher Reeve was betrayed. He refused to promote the movie in the end. So 20 years after that, we got Superman Returns from Bryan Singer. Now, first of all, Brett Ratner was going to direct Superman Returns and it was going to be a very different movie. Singer got onto the phone and said, I really want to make a Superman movie. How about I direct Superman and you direct X-Men 3? So Singer betrayed all his hard work he did with X-Men 1 and 2 and basically allowed X-Men 3 to be more of an underwhelming picture. I still think X-Men 3 The Last Stand is a pretty solid picture. So Singer comes on and he wants to make a Superman the movie and a Superman 2 sequel because he believes that's the only way that you'll get people in audiences if you continue the Reeveverse, the Donnerverse. I don't agree with that. I was excited at the time being a fan of Christopher Reeve's Superman, Superman 78 being the first movie I ever saw. So for me, it was very, very exciting. Now, the movie, in places, is wonderful. It actually gives you what Man of Steel doesn't. It gives you the banter in the Daily Planet. Not that they really pull it off that well, but it's still there. And, you know, Superman's been off the planet for 5 years, as I explained earlier, and Lois Lane has moved on and she's dating James Marsden. Well, she's not dating James, but he's playing Richard White, the nephew of Perry White, the editor of the Daily Planet. And it's an interesting storyline, and it's revealed at the end of the movie that Jason is actually Superman's son. So this kid that she had with Richard White, she didn't really have with Richard White, it's actually Superman's son. The first mistake Singer makes here is because he doesn't read comics, which a lot of people have said. He was never an X-Men fan, but he researched the X-Men and he managed to do 2 great movies. He seemed to get the core material. So if he read a Superman comic, he'd know there's a character called Connor Kent, which is a clone experiment from Lex Luthor using his DNA and Superman's DNA. And Connor Kent becomes Superboy. So if you're going to have Superman having a kid in live action, imagine the excitement in the promotion of Superman Returns if they hear that Connor Kent is coming in the movie. Although they probably would have wanted it to be a twist, so maybe we wouldn't have known about that. But imagine the excitement when we go to cinemas and people, the word of mouth comes out. Oh my God, Connor Kent is in Superman Returns. How excited people would have been. Instead, he calls him Jason, right? In fact, you could have called him Connor throughout the movie and people wouldn't have put, 2 and 2 together until the reveal. It would have been awesome. So that's mistake number 1. But as I said, the biggest mistake was that I believe that this movie was messed with by the studio. The theatrical cut we got isn't what Bryan Singer envisioned. That's my opinion. I don't know this for a fact, but that's what I believe, because the film has too much inconsistencies. There's stunning shots, then there's poor VFX shots that any director worth their worth their metal wouldn't allow in a final edit. It's the same with the Flash movie. There was a great Flash movie, and Andy Muschietti clearly wasn't in charge of what was put in the final cut. And I fear this was the same problem with Superman Returns. I fear that he would have loved the Return to Krypton pre-title sequence to be in the movie, for better VFX shots to be put in to the final edit. For example, the Superman saving the plane, is it Air Force One, is absolutely beautiful. But when he's flying into space at the end, you can tell it's CGI. It looks like a fucking cartoon. It's terrible. Clearly, this was a version of Superman flying into space that was never meant to be used. But it's like the studio put the movie together behind Singer's back. Maybe they'd fired Bryan Singer by then. Who knows? Who knows what the truth is? I mean, he was fired from Bohemian Rhapsody, so it wouldn't be a surprise if the same thing happened here. We'll never know. I'd love to do an investigative thing on these different movies and find out what truly happened behind the scenes, because the BTS is put together by the studio. They do friendly things. They're talking calmly and relaxed. It's never the whole truth of the situation. But something very weird happened with the final edit of Superman Returns. And let's be honest, in terms of DC and WB, they've got fucking form, and they've done this before. And they're the core problems. Another core problem with Superman Returns, when you're in the Daily Planet, when you're in Metropolis, they look wonderful. They look like the 1940s. You know, it's like we're going back in time to the 1940s. And if this was an original movie and not continuing from Superman 78 and Superman 2, I would have been fine with it. But unfortunately, this world that Singer has created looks nothing like Superman 78 or Superman 2. There lies the problem. Brandon Routh is a great Superman, but he's wearing a costume that shrinks his height down visually, and that's a problem. Now, most people didn't like Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane. I didn't mind her. I thought she's a very convincing actor. Now, lots of people tell me she was wearing a wig. If you didn't tell me that, I wouldn't have known. So people keep on talking about her forehead looking too big. That's something I didn't notice. I actually had a huge crush on Kate in Superman Returns. I thought she was sexy. She was beautiful. I actually quite enjoyed her as a modern-day, strong, independent Lois Lane. The only problem with Kate is like the rest of this movie. She doesn't look nothing like Margot Kidder. She doesn't act nothing like Margot Kidder's Lois Lane. And that's the Lois Lane she's playing. And now they kind of get Brandon to do a semi-impression of Christopher Reeve. But by the end of the movie, they do a very clever thing. Brandon Routh becomes his own Clark Kent, his own Superman. I love it in the end when he's in Jason's bedroom and he's reciting what Jor-El, aka Marlon Brando, does so brilliantly, the monologue he speaks to the baby Kal-El before he launches him to Smallville on the planet Earth. He recites that whole speech, and Brandon Routh fucking kills it. No matter how many times I watch that scene, I am in tears. It's absolutely beautiful. So we have 3 Superman movies, kind of original Superman movies, not sequels. So although Superman Returns is supposed to be a sequel to Superman the movie and Superman 2. I get it. But it's kind of a new thing, isn't it, as well? So we have Superman the movie, Superman Returns, and Man of Steel. Superman the movie made record-breaking money. It pleased audiences because basically Richard Donner understood that you don't mess with something that's American mythology. It's very important to the American culture. There's some things, importantly, that you have to stick to the basics on. And, you know, Richard Donner understood this. Superman Returns tries to honour that myth as well, but gets it wrong in places. And, you know, we've already spoken about that edit, that theatrical edit was all wrong. And they just put it together, and they put some stuff together that should never have been in a final cut. And that's obvious. And Man of Steel is a visual treat. It's how a Superman movie should look, feel, and sound. It's got Zack Snyder written all over it. But Zod being killed by Superman lost the movie 400 million. And it forced them to panic and react and basically bring Batman into suit. Affleck's Batman should have had his own movie, maybe after Man of Steel 2 or just before Man of Steel 2, and introducing characters like Wonder Woman and Cyborg and The Flash. So after Man of Steel destabilized the box office for them, they started digging deeper and deeper holes for themselves. BVS was an even more polarizing movie than Man of Steel, if that's even possible. So, you polarize the audience and all of a sudden you've got a problem. Force the studio to make dumb decisions like Justice League, and they still haven't recovered from these situations today. And they're my issues with Superman Returns and Man of Steel. As I say, if you put the best parts of both movies together, you've got the perfect Superman movie. And this is what James Gunn must do with Superman Legacy. You must stick to the core facets that have made Superman and Lois Lane and Perry White and Jimmy Olsen and Lex Luthor and all these supporting characters so popular and beloved since 1938.